Hey guys, I've got some new artwork for you today. This one is a painting I did in Procreate, but it's a little bit different than my last one because I actually wasn't planning to do a painting at all. I was kind of just sketching and testing brushes and just making random stuff in Procreate. But I ended up deciding to challenge myself to finish a painting completely in Procreate 100% without putting it in Photoshop at any point. And I don't usually do that because I'm much more comfortable in Photoshop with the tools and all the hotkeys. I find it really difficult to stay efficient in Procreate all the way to the end. So that was my kind of challenge to myself for this one. The only thing I did in Photoshop was at the very end, I just did some level adjustments and color adjustments. So yeah, I'll show you the time lapse. I'll give you my thoughts and any changes in workflow I had to make to adapt to Procreate. I hope you guys like this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let's go. So I just started months and months ago. I got this, my wife actually got me this iPad, which is insane. It was one of the best gifts I've ever gotten. And she felt like I should get out of my office more, and it'd be nice for me to be able to sit on the deck and draw, or sit on the couch downstairs and not just be cooped up in my office all the time. So it's been really cool to just sketch and draw, and it's extremely versatile, the iPad and Procreate, and I find it really great for sketching. I kind of latched onto that right away. The biggest challenge for me was painting, which you'll see later. But for now, I was just sketching some random shapes and just trying to get a feel for the different brushes. So you see me like messing around with a bunch of different brush strokes and sketching a bunch of different shapes and a bunch of different kind of techniques. Some is like more marker sketching, some is more like you do with like a Sharpie or a ballpoint pen. So I just started detailing this specific little house a little bit more, and I had no plans at this point to paint at all. I just wanted to draw, and I think I was watching TV or something when I was doing this and just drawing something that I felt like I wanted to draw. When I was a kid, my dad taught me to draw, and he didn't really teach me to draw as much as I learned to love drawing just watching him draw. And he's always drawn what he loves, and he's always drawn things that speak to him and kind of call back to things that have influenced him in his life. I remember even when I was really young admiring how sure of himself he was and what he loved, and he didn't feel the need to draw anything other than what gave him joy to draw. So that always really stuck with me, and when I first started getting into the industry, I felt all this pressure to make certain art to appeal to certain studios or certain game projects, and I was rationalizing in my mind why I shouldn't be just drawing the stuff that I really want to draw. I think now I've gotten to a place where I really realize that if you just pursue what you really want to do art-wise, like if you just focus on what you really want to draw and paint subject matter-wise, and you don't let any of this, like any of what's popular and what people are looking for influence that, I think it really comes through in your work in a strong way, and your passion for what you really love to draw and paint comes through, and that is a huge asset that not very many people have. I'm always trying to draw and paint something that I love and gives me a feeling of nostalgia, or gives me a deep fulfillment to express. So it may not get you a job in the beginning, because it may be that projects going on are just not looking for that kind of thing, depending on what you like. But in the long run, I think it's much more beneficial to hone your skills in creating what you really love to do, because it comes through in the quality of your work, and then that pays dividends in the end. And you become a really special artist with this really developed, specific style unique to yourself and what you really like. Sometimes starting an image this way and getting a pretty resolved drawing first is a really nice way to start a painting, because there's no questions to be asked once you start painting. You have this, if you end up with a drawing that you really like, all you have to do is make sure that what you like about that stays intact in the painting process, which is easier said than done, but I just always keep a backup of the original drawing. But it's really nice to paint this way, because like at least you have this nice drawing that you finished when you move into the painting phase. And even if the painting phase is a failure, at least you still have the nice drawing that you really liked. So it's quite fun to work this way. And one of the workflows I adjusted in Procreate versus my regular workflow in Photoshop is I relied pretty heavily on the line drawing, just so I felt like I could be really free with my brushes in behind the lines, almost like almost like a coloring book. I kept the lines on top on a multiply layer and just paint really freely and expressively with random brushes, using textures and like messing around with colors, and just sort of building up the painting that way until eventually the lines get lighter and lighter and lighter, and then eventually I just merge the lines right with the colors and just start painting on top. And the same way I do in Photoshop, as you saw in my last video, is I always kept an older version of the painting on a separate layer, just so I could constantly compare and see if I ruined anything or if the painting got worse than the last time I had saved it. And I drew a bunch of random stuff. Like, I still, in the early stages, didn't know I was going to paint, so even after I more or less finished the drawing of the house, I still just kept drawing random stuff, because I think this is over just months and months. I kept opening the same file every now and then and just drawing stuff. And then it was only a couple weeks ago I actually opened it and decided I'm gonna try and do this painting. So I just blocked in some mood based on this photo reference, trying to stick to that pretty closely and use that as my main reference for colors, and try and slot the colors in a way that makes sense in my composition, because it's so different. The setting of my image is so different than the reference. Messing around with the values and making them work in my image the way they work in the reference. I wish I had done this as a landscape, because versus a portrait ratio, because I find it's a little better viewing experience to see it on as like a 16:9. So next time I think I'll do a wide canvas. I know this and my last video are both like vertical, so that's actually kind of weird for me. I don't usually do portrait ratio paintings, but I'll try and change back to 16:9 for next painting, because I find it's much more enjoyable to watch. And things get kind of small. You can almost barely see some of the details I'm putting in when it's vertical like this. So you can see me dropping in some random other references that I'm using for specific details. So I drop in these old houses because there were really specific details in the brick and like the kind of wooden beams in the house and how that intersects with the stone, all the color variation going on, and there's different values of stone being exposed underneath this like top layer on the outside of the house. So getting some specific references for that stuff is really helpful. And then I spent quite a bit of time fooling around with the foreground. This is where my painting struggles really came in, because I was trying to get the right amount of noise in the details in the foreground, but I wanted it to stay pretty loose and painterly. So it's always a hard balance to strike, is like you have this kind of really rough painterly style going on that you like, and then but you also want to define stuff, and in that kind of process you can destroy the nice loose simplicity that you had going. So I just took 2 references. I'm not looking at colors or anything. I'm literally just looking at the level of noise in the ground on these kind of Scottish Highland type environments, because I want some of those rocks and kind of brown thatchy grass in the foreground, and I want to define it enough so that it reads nicely, but I also want to keep the simplicity and the sort of loose painterly aesthetic. Doing stuff like the shingles on the roof and having to duplicate and warp things is one of those tools that is a little bit like, it's a little bit harder to use in Procreate, in my opinion, than in Photoshop, because you just don't have 2 hands to use hotkeys and make adjustments with. You have to like open the menus and select stuff. So I'm a little bit less efficient for sure in Procreate, a lot less efficient, but I would like to get much more adept in using it, because there's a lot of benefits to just being able to do it wherever you want. And it is fun to be able to sit like in the family room on the couch with the dog and just draw and kind of get out of the office, and if you have enough shade you can even do it outside. So now I just went back into Photoshop and made some color adjustments, and I lightened it a substantial amount because it felt really dark when I brought it back to the PC. I ended up going back to the photo reference and getting it closer to those values, because I wanted this kind of really dark mood. It's almost like I think when I first started it, I was playing Elden Ring for the first time, so you can see the influence in the towers in the back, those kind of giant towers, and the mood really was influenced by that game too. I wasn't looking at any references or anything for it, but I think it was just in my mind. It was really like I might have even just chosen it subconsciously. So I actually used some filters to add some effects to the background. I wanted it a little bit out of focus and a little bit more like loose, and I did use this filter called Acviz, which is a third-party filter, and it makes this kind of oil painting look out of your file, but use it with responsibility, because you might be tempted to just get photos off Google and put it through this filter, and then it looks like you painted it, but just know if you do, I'll know. So now just really going back to the original values from that reference. It was pretty easy. I just did a curves adjustment and switched it to black and white so I could just see and make sure I really nailed the values. And then I punch up the lighting in just spots that I want to be a little bit more focal. So that's it for this one. I hope you guys liked this. It was pretty fun doing this on the iPad, and it's really cool that it just records everything that you do and all your inputs. So it's super easy to get the footage. I just want to say thanks again for all the comments on my last video. I read through every single one. I haven't gotten around to answering all of them, but it's overwhelming the amount of responses I got, honestly. So I have read a lot of the comments and suggestions for other video topics, and I've written them all down. And I'm just writing notes in a notebook about how I might want to approach those topics. And I think like I have plans to do a whole video just about edges and creating hidden and lost edges, and when and how to use that in your paintings, how to have that serve a purpose. And maybe also a video about bridging the gap between student work and really achieving that professional look to your work, which can be a really hard plateau for a lot of students or people who are just starting to learn to kind of climb over. That, and among a bunch of others, are some things that I want to approach. And I just want to say thanks again for all the comments and suggestions. All your feedback is awesome. Thank you so much for everyone, all my new subscribers and everything. And if you like this video, like it, please consider subscribing to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.